Welcome to the chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 58 of Chalk Talk, brought to you by the Painted Lines. I'm your host, Shane Half, and you can follow me on Twitter at halfandhalf_TPL. I'm here today to break down the draft grades for each team in the NFC East, and we're going to do it a little bit different. In order to get through these in a timely manner, I'm going to put myself on a 5-minute clock, so I have 5 minutes only to talk about a draft grade. There's going to be a timer going here on the side if you are watching this online. If you're listening to the podcast, obviously you won't see that, but I will be racing that timer. And when it hits zeros, I'm done. I can't say anything else about the team, and I have to move on. So we're going to see how this goes. Only recording this once, no do-overs. And so we're just going to see how much I can get through, how much I can talk about the draft for each team. And so I'm going to talk about what I loved, what I liked, and things I didn't like, and finally assign a grade as we are hitting zeros for each of these teams. So we're going to start with the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys selected Tyler Smith in the first round, offensive lineman, second round Sam Williams, Jalen Tolbert in the third, Jake Ferguson in the fourth, Matt Walzecchio and Deron Bland in the fifth, as well as John Ridgway, and then Devin Harper in the sixth. And so, first of all, the first thing I really liked about this draft is the selection of Jake Ferguson in the fourth round. As a fourth rounder, he's got decent potential as a starter. I think he's got good replacement value for Dalton Schultz down the road. The Cowboys have a lot of offensive weapons, and so they don't need an elite tight end. And I think Ferguson can slide in, and he can provide good value for the Cowboys early on. And I think he can eventually supplant Dalton Schultz if Dalton Schultz decides he wants a bigger contract. Another guy I really loved was the linebacker Damone Clark out of LSU. He was number 71 overall on my big board. The Cowboys got him at 176. Now, he fell because of major injury issues. He had a spinal fusion surgery, and so he's likely not playing this year. It's going to be a medical redshirt year essentially for him. But at that spot, it's great value, and if he ever gets on the field, it's going to be a really good pick for them. And so I like the value that they were able to get out of a fifth round pick. This is the type of territory that you take a shot on those type of players. And I love the Cowboys doing that. I also liked what I liked Sam Williams in the second round. He's a speed rusher. He should get a lot of opportunities to win one-on-one with DeMarcus Lawrence and Micah Parsons drawing double teams. So I think Williams was a smart pick there. He's a guy that can develop into a good pass rusher with them, and he should get light attention early in his career. I also like the selection of John Ridgway in the fifth round, the defensive tackle out of Arkansas. He's just a really good run stuffer. He's a nose tackle, and the Cowboys didn't really have someone that can eat up space like that for them on the defensive line. And so I think this will let them get into lighter boxes. It'll help them a lot in the run game. I do think you will see Ridgway playing a role on rundowns early in his career, which is really good for a fifth round pick. And so kudos to the Cowboys for that selection. I also liked the selection of Tyler Smith out of Tulsa in the first round. I know a lot of people made fun of that pick online. They didn't like it. I see it with Smith. I think he's a very high ceiling player. I think his best position in the NFL is going to be guard, but he played tackle in college, so he has that versatility. And the Cowboys have both a guard and a tackle spot open. And so he is a guy that can slot in early on and play. I think he is a tone setter in the run game. He's just a mauler. He loves to go push defensive linemen and linebackers around into the second level. He's got great athleticism. The problem is that Smith isn't a finished product. He's raw in his pass sets. He had a ton of penalties, especially holding penalties last season. And so I think it would be ideal if they could get him into guard so he doesn't have to pass set on an edge against edge rushers at tackle. But I do think the Cowboys are going to want him to play tackle. I think he is going to be the starting right tackle week one. And I'm just not sure that he's ready for that. And so I do like the ceiling of him. I don't think it was a huge reach by the Cowboys, but I do wonder how he's going to do early on in his career. And then some things I didn't like. I didn't like the selection of Matt Walzecchio in the fifth round. I thought that was just too high for him. He's not a player that I really cared for at all. And then in the sixth round, they took Devin Harper, another linebacker. And at some point, the Cowboys just have to stop drafting linebackers. They've drafted so many linebackers. They already took Clark, who I mentioned has the injury issues, but there's other places that you can spend picks. Go take a flyer on a secondary player. Go take a flyer on really anything. They could use secondary help, maybe some special teams help. But Harper, I just don't like that pick. I think the Cowboys routinely invest too much into the linebacker position. And you saw it here with 2 day 3 picks spent on linebackers when I thought there were other things they could have done. But I'm not going to kill them too much for a 6th round pick. Overall, I'm going to give the Cowboys draft a B. I think Smith is going to be a starter year 1. Sam Williams is going to be a rotational player, and Jalen Tolbert, the wide receiver in the 3rd round, is also likely a rotational player. So I think that's pretty good value for a team that was already pretty good. I would have liked to have seen them do some more on the defensive side of the ball, particularly in the secondary, but it is what it is. And I give the Cowboys a solid B for this draft. Now let's move on to the New York Giants. With a pair of top 10 picks, they took Kayvon Thibodeaux and Evan Neal, both trench players. In the 2nd round, they took wide receiver Wan'Dale Robinson. The 3rd round, they took offensive lineman Joshua Nzudu and cornerback Cordero Flott. In the 4th round, they took Daniel Bellinger and Dane Belton. In the 5th round, Micah McFadden, DJ Davidson, and Marcus McKeithen. And in the 6th round, they took Darian Beavers. And here's what I loved about their draft. I loved that they did not screw up the top of the draft. And you might say, well, it's easy to not screw up top 10 picks. They drafted twice in the first 7 picks. But over the years, the Giants have routinely screwed those picks up. They took Daniel Jones at 6. They took Saquon Barkley at 2. They took Eli Apple at 10. They took Eric Flowers at 9. And so when you look at a team that has routinely struggled in the top 10, I thought they had a slam dunk. Kayvon Thibodeaux is my top edge in the class. He was the number 2 player overall for me. And Evan Neal was my top offensive tackle. And so I think that they got a building block, a franchise player on each side of the ball in the trenches, which is really important when you start a rebuild. If Daniel Jones isn't their guy, which I suspect he won't be, they're now going to have 2 tackles in place, Andrew Thomas and Evan Neal, to bookend that offensive line as they look to draft someone next year. So I loved what they did at the top of the 1st round. Another guy that I really liked was Darian Beavers at 186. He was just outside my top 100 on my big board. And so to get him with the 182nd pick, I thought was really good value. He is a true thumper at the inside linebacker position. He's big, he's strong, he's physical. He's a throwback football player in every way. He doesn't have the best athleticism, so he's going to struggle in coverage, but he can come downhill and thump in the running game. I think he can contribute on special teams and be kind of a spot player, a rotational piece for them. I thought it was a good value for a 6th round pick. Now, what did I not like about their draft? As much as I thought that the Giants just killed day 1 of the draft, I thought they really, really stumbled on day 2. They took Wan'Dale Robinson at 43 overall, the wide receiver. Wan'Dale Robinson wasn't in my top 100. He was consensus 103 on our board, and they took him at 43. Robinson is really similar to Kadarius Toney, a guy that they drafted in the 1st round last year, and he's still on the roster. Like, there's been lots of talk about him leaving. It hasn't happened yet. And because it hasn't happened yet, drafting Wan'Dale Robinson is just a bad use of resources here, because now teams know either you have to move on from Kadarius Toney, and so it deflates his value even more, or, one of these guys is going to sit on the bench. So it's just a bad use of resources, in my opinion. John Mechie, the 3rd, went with the very next pick. He would have been a better pick. George Pickens was available. He went to the Steelers a few picks later. Sky Moore went to the Chiefs later in the 2nd. Even Calvin Austin, who lasted until pick 138, I think would have been a better pick at 43 than Wan'Dale Robinson. And so I understand the desire to go get a wide receiver, and I don't hate taking a wide receiver here. There's just several guys I would have taken before Robinson. I think Robinson was a very poor pick. And then you go down to like Cordero Flott, who they took at pick 81. This is a 175-pound nickel defender. In my opinion, he's redundant with Xavier McKinley, Julian Love, and even Dane Belton, who was their 4th round pick. All guys that are like safeties. They can play in the slot. I just don't understand what they're trying to build here. You can't have this many slot defenders on the field. I know we're moving to more positionless football, but these guys, they need outside corners. They need linebackers. There's a lot of things they needed. I just don't understand continually drafting these slot type players. And so I thought the Giants had a really strong day one. I thought they really struggled in day two. But overall, they nailed the most important picks. And so I'm going to give the Giants a B+ for this draft. Any draft you can walk out and feel like you have a franchise cornerstone at edge rusher and at offensive tackle is a great draft. So a solid B+ for the New York Giants. Now let's move on to the Washington Commanders. In the first round, they drafted Jahan Dotson, wide receiver. In the second, they took defensive tackle Phidarian Mathis. In the third round, they took running back Brian Robinson. In the fourth round, they took Percy Butler. In the fifth round, they spent 2 selections. They got Sam Howell and Cole Turner. And then in the seventh round, they also made a pair of selections, taking Chris Paul and Christian Holmes. So first of all, what did I love about this draft? I loved the pick of Sam Howell in the fifth round at pick 144. This guy was thought before the season started to be a potential number 1 pick. Now that goes to show you how much one season can change that perception and how rightly didn't go in the first round, much less number 1. But at the fifth round, this is a good value. He's a dual threat quarterback. He got North Carolina to 6 wins this year, despite the fact that all of his weapons graduated and went to the draft last year. And so this is a guy that can come in. He can be a spot starter. I don't think he's going to be like a long-term starter in the league, but I think he's going to be a good backup. He gives you good insurance for Carson Wentz. If Carson Wentz gets injured, which Carson Wentz hasn't played a full season since, I'm not sure. I'd have to look that up. I don't know if he's ever played a full season. So he could step in and be a spot starter. He's going to be better than Taylor Heineke there. Maybe he develops into something where you can continue to kick quarterback down the road if Carson Wentz doesn't work out. So I thought this was a great insurance policy, great value at pick 144. But let me talk about some things now that I didn't like. The first thing, I didn't like trading back from 11 to 16 for a third and a fourth. And they saw multiple wide receivers pass them by. They could have taken Chris Olave. They could have taken Jamison Williams, but then they took Jahan Dotson, and it was just too early. I had him at 30th overall on my big board. This guy is light. He's small. It's as if they saw the Rams select Tutu Atwell last year and then play him in 10 offensive snaps and said, I need some of that. Now, I do like Dotson as a player, but this was just far too high, and there were far better players on the board at 11 for them that would have been worth more than what they got trading back. I think Dotson is going to be a good slot. I think he's going to work underneath well for Carson Wentz. I just did not like the move to trade back and then the move to take Dotson, a guy who they could have gotten later. I didn't like the Phidarian Mathis pick either. I liked the player, but it was too early. I had him at 100 on my big board. They took him at 47. And where is he going to play? They have Daron Payne. They have Jonathan Allen already. Maybe they let Payne walk after he plays out his 5th-year option this year. But if you want to take this type of player, take Travis Jones. That's a guy that I was much higher on than Mathis, and consensus was much higher on than Mathis. But the defensive front is not the issue for the Commanders. It's the secondary. And they just didn't really address that even until the 4th round. They could have taken Jaquan Brisker, a pick later than Phidarian Mathis. He went off the board at 48. He would have been a great pick, but they didn't do it. They chose to, again, invest on the defensive line when they really need secondary help. They also, they took Brian Robinson, a running back who, again, I think is a good player at 98, but they already have Antonio Gibson and they have JD McKissick. These are just guys that I think are going to see the field a lot more. I didn't understand what they were doing in this draft. Now, one of the picks I did like, another value pick I thought, was Chris Paul, the offensive lineman in the 7th round. I was afraid he was going to go undrafted. I thought he should have been like an early day 3 pick. So I do like the value here. But for the Washington Commanders, I'm going to give them a grade of a D. And for this reason, they had a losing record last year. They made 8 picks, including 3 in the top 100. And the only starter they walked away with was a slot receiver. Yes, I liked their value of Sam Howell in the 5th. I liked their value of Chris Paul in the 7th, but I have nothing good to say about what they did, any selection they made on day 1 or day 2, or their trade back on day 1. I thought it was bad process, and I think it was a bad result for this team. I expected the Commanders to come away from the draft improved much more than they were when they were slotted to select 11th overall. Now let's talk about the Philadelphia Eagles. They drafted defensive tackle Jordan Davis at 13, offensive lineman Cameron Jurgens at 51, and Nakobe Dean, the linebacker, at 83. They added a pair of sixth-round picks in edge rusher Kyron Johnson and tight end Grant Calcaterra. Now let's talk about what I loved here. I loved the A.J. Brown trade. They traded pick 18 and pick 101 for A.J. Brown, who will now play for 5 years after he signs his extension at an average of $21 million per year. And he's only 24 years old. If you compare that to the Tyreek Hill trade of this offseason, the Davante Adams trade, Adams went for a first and a second round pick. Hill went for a first, second, and fourth, and then an additional fourth and a sixth next year. So trade cost was much cheaper for A.J. Brown. They both signed extensions that will pay them $28 million per year over the next 5 years. So it was not only a draft capital savings, but a savings of $7 million per year over the next 5 years in terms of contract. And like I said, Brown is only 24, whereas Davante Adams is 30. Tyreek Hill is 28. Now, are Adams and Hill better receivers than Brown? Yes, they're not that much better. And so this is a great deal for the Eagles. They walk away with a veteran player that they know is good to address one of their biggest positions of need. Another thing I loved in this draft was the selection of Nakobe Dean. I had him as a fringe first-round talent, and he dropped all the way to 83 with medical concerns, and the Eagles took him there. And it's just fantastic value. Even if he only plays like one game in his career, it was worth the risk. But if you get 2, 3, 4 years out of this guy, or even into a second contract, it's just such phenomenal value. All it took for the Eagles to draft a linebacker was a first-round talent dropping over 60 spots, and they finally got their guy. Now let's talk about what I liked. I liked the Jordan Davis pick. Jordan Davis changes the math of your defense. He allows you to play light in the box and control the line of scrimmage, which is going to help the linebackers. It's going to help the pass coverage. There's 2 ways to get better pass coverage: to put better players in the secondary or to put more players in the secondary. And Jordan Davis allows the Eagles to put more players in the secondary. Now, the trade up was expensive, but it was the right call. I think it's likely both Hamilton and Davis go 13-14 if the Eagles sit at 15. And that was the end of a tier for me. So I liked the move to move up. I would have preferred Hamilton as the pick, but I love Jordan Davis. I liked the Kyron Johnson pick. He's a backup to Hassan Reddick. He's a special teamer. He's going to fill a role that they don't have anybody else that could fill should Hassan Reddick get hurt. And then I like Grant Calcaterra as a receiving threat. The Eagles ran 12 personnel, 25% of their plays last year. They attempted 125 passes with 2 tight ends on the field. And their number 2 tight end, Jack Stoll, had 22 receiving yards on the year. So this gives an extra threat that defenses will have to account for in the passing game when the Eagles go 12 personnel. Now let's talk about what I didn't like. I didn't like not investing in the secondary. That was a major weakness for the Eagles, and they failed to address it both in free agency and the draft. And so, we'll see what happens with the Jonathan Gannon defense. They did sign some UDFAs, but I didn't like that they didn't address the secondary. And then I didn't like the Cam Jurgens pick. I like the player. I thought it was a little high. I've come around on that. The Eagles have had Hall of Fame play for a decade at center. And so I understand not wanting uncertainty there. He's a similar profile to Jason Kelce. He can come in and be mentored by Jason Kelce and get a year of work under Jeff Stoutland. And so I'm better with the pick now than I was. There wasn't a corner or a safety I would take available, so I'm okay with that pick. It just wasn't one of my favorites. Overall, I'm going to give this draft an A. Even if Nakobe Dean doesn't play as a rookie, which they should bring him along slowly, even if he doesn't play, Davis is going to make a big impact. Jurgens will develop behind Kelce, and A.J. Brown helps properly evaluate Jalen Hurts, which is the biggest task this year. You must have a proper evaluation on Jalen Hurts by the end of the year. Pulling all of that off without touching next year's draft picks is just great value. It was a great job by Howie Roseman. A solid A for me. I really liked what the Eagles did in this draft. Well, that's going to about wrap this up. I did manage to stay under 5 minutes for each of these. It was going to be tough, but I was able to get it done. So I hope you guys enjoyed this sort of format. I'm looking to branch out and do some different things as we get into the off season. So thank you for joining us for episode number 58 of Chalk Talk. if you enjoy what you heard on the show, and we know that you do, be sure you smash that subscribe button, turn on notifications so you don't miss the next episode. Drop us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, and we'd really appreciate it. You can follow me on Twitter at @halfandhalf_TPL, and you can follow the Painted Lines at the Painted Lines. And so from me and from the Painted Lines, we'll see you next time.